Welcome to our weekly virtual Capital Connection. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors for this weekly series with Advent Health, Polk State College with the support of Tampa Electric. We are in week 7, and so going to spend some time giving you an update this week on where we're at. Obviously, a lot of the committee meetings have slowed down. There are still some remaining, but all the focus is on the budget at this point and what bills will make it across the finish line, what won't, where the jockeying begins. So we will dive right in. Just as a reminder, as I do every week, the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors does approve and publish an annual legislative priority statement, which is of course hosted on our website. But if you would like a copy of it, just let me know. And a reminder of who our legislative delegation, the folks that represent us up in Tallahassee and are working on our behalf this session. So week 6, as of last week, we had 11 more bills filed. So obviously that's slowing down as we get to the finish line, leading towards week 9 of session. And so just a recap, as I've mentioned in the past, COVID liability has passed and has been signed. And so that is moving forward. Main Street Fairness. This is the area that we had movement on last week. This originally started as the online sales tax reform, but as the numbers came together on what this could potentially do, it was thought that it could be a good mechanism to replenish the unemployment compensation trust fund. And in the end, if they looked at the budget numbers there, reduced the business rent tax from 5.5 to 2%. This has passed and has been sent to the governor as of yesterday afternoon, had not been signed yet by the governor. It passed on partisan lines. What you'll hear in the pro-con debate, obviously a pro for business in terms of staving off a tax increase when it comes to the unemployment compensation trust fund. Also reduces down the business rent tax, which has been on our agenda every single year that I've been in this job for the last 7 years, to reduce down the the sales tax on commercial leases, which Florida is the only state that has that. You'll hear people that were opposed to the bill talk about it being a tax increase on the citizens of Florida. If you look at it, depending on what your vantage point is, it's something that we should have paid all along that we were not paying. So it was an existing tax that we should have been paying. So, but nonetheless, it has passed and has been sent to the governor. Visit Florida is something we've talked about each week. In the opinion of the Florida Chamber lobbyist, it's unlikely that the bill proposed to kind of codify it into law and not have us have to vote on whether it should exist or not, certainly still vote on the budget. It doesn't look like that particular bill will make headway. Who knows? It could, but it doesn't look like it in terms of the lobbyists that I work with in Tallahassee. And then QTI legislation has stalled at this point, no change on this week to report to that. Where there has been some movement is on House Bill 1429, which would allow for tourist development tax to be used to finance flood mitigation and other projects there. That has been referred to the House calendar for today, and it has stalled in the Community Affairs Committee in the Senate. So we'll have to see where that goes. That is obviously of some concern for those of us that believe that those tourist tax dollars should be protected for reinvestment into promoting the state or our individual communities. There are other measures of this bill which are concerning in terms of the tourist development tax having to go up for referendum every 5 years, where it has been something that's been kind of something that's consistently relied upon over the course of time. So continuing to watch that. So budgets passed in their respective houses last week. And so now how everything fleshes out in the budget, and different interest groups, different chamber members are coming forward with either concerns or applauds for how their different organizations or interests have been funded in that budget. One of which is hospital funding. And I do want to highlight this. This was brought to our attention by several of our healthcare members. pulled a quote from an op-ed that was published in the Orlando Sentinel by Mayor Jerry Demings, just to point out some of the information that's in this bill, that depending on the respective bill, it could cut money to hospitals. And of course, with the justification that they're getting CARES Act money. However, many of our hospital entities feel that that CARES Act money is meant to help them offset lost revenue that would have come through elective surgeries. And as you will recall, elective surgeries were postponed for a pretty long period of time last year due to concerns regarding availability of PPP, obviously transmission of the virus, things of that nature. So just wanted to highlight this, because this is something that is certainly a big discussion in terms of the budget and then how it impacts our hospitals and many of those that were on the front lines over the last year. The resiliency package passed, and this is being described as the third deal. But where this really hits something that we talk about every year is the Sadowski Fund and affordable housing. This essentially takes money from that fund to put measures in place to help combat sea level rise and wastewater grants, and kind of ring fences $200 million of the Sadowski Fund to be locked into affordable housing, at least statutorily. Of course, it's passed both. It's been sent to the governor, but has its proponents and its opponents. Obviously, affordable housing is something that is a heavy discussion in every single government across this country. If you listened to the city commission meeting last night, there was over an hour of public comment by a particular advocacy group named Peace, discussing affordable housing and putting some people up at the microphone that have struggled with housing throughout their lifetime. So it is something that every municipality, every county government, and certainly every state government in this country is trying to address. So bills we're watching, as you can see, the only updates are highlighted in yellow. So that has to do with the residential property insurance. No particular movement on the other bills that we've been watching week to week, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going anywhere. It just means that they weren't addressed in last week's meetings. So with the residential property insurance, Senate Bill 76, I pulled a slide from the Florida Chamber presentation just to highlight this in a little bit more detail for those that would be interested. The Florida Chamber likes the bill because it addresses some legal fees issues, which they believe strongly inflates the cost of insurance. And certainly year over year, as Florida being ranked, and pardon my French, but as a legal hellhole in many rankings, it is something that they are trying to address, certainly when it comes to insurance and our insurance costs continuing to go up year over year. Other bills that we're watching, some movement on the beverage law that passed in the Senate. This has to do with to-go containers and kind of loosening the ability for restaurants to sell alcohol to go. The bill that we've talked about Bright Futures, as I mentioned to you last week, it has been amended down to essentially putting a hold on student accounts until they take career, what we call, when I was at UCF, career readiness programs. It is something that undeclared majors have had to take for a while, and basically state that they understand that their degree program may or may not lead to employment based off of how the Department of Education ranks their degree program. So it has been quote unquote watered down from its initial form of not providing scholarships or scaling the amount you can get through Bright Futures through the degree program that you choose. But it is still certainly something that could impact Bright Futures funding. And certainly Bright Futures is something that a lot of students in Florida rely upon. It has been amended and passed in the Senate and has been sent to the House for consideration. No movement on film incentives, so that's probably not going anywhere, likely dead for this session. And then craft distilleries, as we've mentioned, an expansion of the craft distilleries has passed in the Senate and referred to the House Special Order calendar for today. So the week ahead, The Senate has session scheduled April 14th, and appropriations, an extremely hefty appropriations meeting scheduled for April 15th. And I see that Chad Davis is on the call, so I will elevate him to a panelist as Senator Stargel is the chair of that appropriations committee. Want to give Chad an opportunity to speak to that. And then the House session actually has a session, at least on their calendar, for pretty much every day for the rest of the week. So as you can tell, things are moving quickly, and we are seeing things that have been plucked out of obscurity. For example, House Bill 1, that is called the riot bill, has been plucked out and moved forward in the Senate because it was stalled in its initial committee stop. And of course, with it being House Bill 1, those of you that might be familiar, the lower numbers tend to be the priorities. And so though that has been moved forward, it was a priority of the governor. So we'll see where that falls. So Chad, I see you've joined us face to face, if you will. So I looked at the appropriations agenda for Thursday, and boy, oh boy, could that be a long meeting. So just want to give you an opportunity to speak to obviously appropriations being the linchpin and how that all ties into the budget and the final committee stop for most bills. So just give us a little bit of an update there.
Sure. So we are coming into the final stretch. The next step with the budget, of course, is going to be the conferencing. And while they have not announced yet when that's going to take place, my guess is that it could be anytime either later this week or early next week. So right now, what we're dealing with is we're trying to tie up all loose ends. There are some bills that are still kind of lingering out there that need to get passed to, I guess, kind of appease the leaders. You know, the speaker has his agenda, the president has his agenda, and the governor has his agenda. And they all have their priority bills they want to see passed, and that goes into account when they start looking at the budget and the items that are going to make it into the budget. So that's kind of what we saw last week with House Bill 1 getting teed up. That is a really big priority for the governor. And now we've got all these bills that are, excuse me, that have their final stop in appropriations, and we only have a couple more appropriations meetings left. So that's why those agendas are getting much longer. We're also trying to make sure that we get any bills that will have appropriations tied to them that will be considered during conferencing. Make sure that those are going to make it so that we can consider those as we go through the process. The Rules Committee also is the last stop of reference for a lot of bills, and they will continue to meet. I think they can meet all the way up through the last week of session. So there's not quite as much pressure to get the bills that have a rules stop. You know, ideally, a bill that's in rules does not have an appropriation tied to it, so that would not have as much of an impact on the budget. But yep, that's where we're at. Those appropriations meetings are getting quite long. We have those big marathon meetings as we get those last few bills through. A lot of those bills are agency bills, so these are bills that have a lot of stuff in them that the agencies have brought to our attention. So they are pretty important to try to get through, so that we can consider their impact on the budget.
Yes, and one particular bill that the Florida Chamber is watching on data privacy, I forgot to mention that one. That one has been amended to take out some clauses that the Florida Chamber was concerned about in terms of how it would impact business. In terms of the education front, Chad, there are several education bills obviously going forward this year. We watch budget numbers when it comes to education, and certainly anything that would impact our K through 12 or our post-secondary institutions in the area. But is there anything in particular that you feel the listeners on the call need to be aware of when it comes to the education bills that are making their way through?
Well, there are a couple of education issues that have come up, specifically with K through 12. One is dealing with how they're approaching the scholarships. They're kind of merging those scholarships together. I don't know as much of the details on that. Education is actually not my policy expertise, but my understanding is that that's an issue that's been worked on quite a bit before coming into session. So it's not something that was just kind of brought up on a whim. And I think the hope is to expand those scholarships By bringing them together, they are kind of consolidating them, but then they want to be able to offer more to more students. So I don't know where they're going to end on that, but that's one of the issues. One of the big issues we've heard from a lot of people back at home. They've done a great job in reaching out to their members, and that's related to how testing is going to be handled this year. And testing is going to hold everyone harmless. That was something that the Commissioner of Education came out, Richard Corcoran, and announced that the testing will not be used for I guess budget purposes or turnaround purposes. So that is a really good thing. We've heard from the school board, we've heard from people back home, and that was very important. I'm glad to see everybody engaged on that issue.
Yeah, really something, one of those rare issues that almost everyone agreed on as it came through. You saw a lot of positives, both coming from the school districts around the state, the legislature last week, the teachers unions around the state, just something that a lot of people agreed on. I think we can all understand this last year has been really unusual and adding an additional stressor on a student. So it's important to have a baseline. And so I think the fact that they are still testing is important to a lot of people in terms of gauging where everybody is, but the fact that the scores won't count against them certainly helps a lot of people. I think if you were a student kind of going through that, or certainly a parent. So very good. Well, a lot of things that obviously we're watching, and that one was a particular key area for the school district. Gambling was another thing that came up in the last week, and it's anybody's guess whether anything will happen. I think that on an article I read yesterday, for all of time, we're really close to a gambling agreement, but it never seems to make it across the finish line. But what was interesting about some of the language that came out was discussions around forming a gaming commission, uncoupling dog track racing, which obviously there was a constitutional amendment on that. From I think it was horse racing. I'm not a gambler, and I don't understand everything around it, but as well as negotiations with the Seminole tribe. So do you have any crystal ball on where you think that discussion will go?
I'm like you. Every year I've been in this process, we've always been real close to the deal, and then it never really materializes in the end. The bills that came forward this week, which were committee bills, again, they kind of came out of nowhere. One dealt with creating the gaming commission. That would be more about enforcing the laws that are on the books. So that's not a bad thing if we're going to have that activity going on in the state. This would give a gaming commission underneath the office of the Attorney General the ability to enforce those. Then the other does deal with the decoupling. Greyhound racing, since greyhound racing is no longer allowed, that does allow for the current racetracks that have the card games and slot machines to continue that practice. But then this kind of expanded the decoupling to the horse racing, so that those tracks would have the option. And I don't know much about it. I've never really been to one of these institutions, but my understanding is some of them, they can operate if they have a monitor feed showing a horse race. That kind of allows them to be considered like there's horse racing going on there. So I honestly don't know how all that works, but this is meant to give those that already have their card rooms and their set up, be able to practice that without the requirement of having the racing. I guess that's a good thing. I don't know. It's really up. I don't really have an opinion on it. The one thing though that we're not seeing this year because of the Constitution, the No Casinos Amendment that passed, is we're not talking about expanding casinos in South Florida, which has been a big conversation piece over the last few years, especially under President Galvano. So that is kind of off the table. That is not being discussed. I think that was really the issue that a lot of people had concerns with, especially in Central Florida, dealing with the family-friendly nature of our tourism industry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Chad, thank you. Anything else we need to be aware of before I move on to federal updates?
Just one thing, you brought up the insurance bill 76. And that is a really important bill in my opinion. And that was we got a letter from the Commissioner of Insurance, David Altmeyer, and he brought out a statistic I just want to mention to everyone that's watching that I think is really telling. You referred to it as the litigious hellhole we have here going on in Florida.
Technical term. That's a very technical term.
It is a technical term. It's a term of art. In 2019, Florida accounted for 8% of all homeowners claims in the country, but 76% of lawsuits against insurance companies over those claims. So that's pretty bad. I think that shows kind of the issue we're trying to deal with here. So it did pass off the Senate floor. We'll see what happens in the House. The House is that they do have quite a few more trial lawyers in the House, so that's always creates a dynamic over there as to how these bills move. But you know, it is definitely a problem that we're trying to address here, and I hope to see it make it all the way.
Yes, thank you. That is astonishing statistic when you hear it put that way.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much, Chad. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Now, just a couple federal updates. The big discussion right now is, of course, the infrastructure package. I shared this all with you last week from the Florida Chamber of Commerce in terms of how the package is broken down. The update this week really has to do with how the bill would move forward. It is becoming more partisan in terms of its pathway to passage. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But obviously, there are a lot of people cheerleading a lot of the things that are in there: expansion of broadband, affordable housing, as I mentioned earlier. Certainly from an infrastructure perspective, Florida would be very open to taking advantage of transportation dollars as we continue to be one of the fastest growing states in the country. But the biggest concern, or where the concern lays primarily, is in how you pay for it. And there appear to be a lot of impacts on businesses through this particular infrastructure package. The pretty much every national business organization has come out against the mechanisms to pay for this package. So we'll continue to watch this closely and determine if particular federal calls to action are needed in working with our state delegation at the federal level on this one. So I will open it up to any questions. I haven't seen anything dropped in there as of yet. Of course, these calls every week are about what's happening at the state level with updates on the federal level. But if there are any concerns, comments, questions that you have, whether they be at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, please make sure that I'm aware of what you are watching. I know that, Donna's on the call today from the city. Florida League of Cities is obviously watching a lot of things that are going on. And we try to stay in the loop with everything that they're watching on how it's going to impact our local governments as well. So without any other questions, I will go ahead and end the call. We will pick up again next Tuesday, April 20th. And again, if you have anything else that you're watching, budget concerns, anything along those lines, please loop me in so that we can discuss with our delegation in Tallahassee. Everyone have a fantastic Tuesday.